I was the recently bankrupt daughter of the Smiths. To save our company, my father married me off to the new tech mogul, Louis. What no one knew was that Louis was my ex-boyfriend, the one I'd dumped. On our wedding night, he looked at me coldly. Don't think for a second I still have feelings for you. Marrying you is just a business move. Once the acquisition is done, we're getting a divorce. Suddenly, a line of text floated past my eyes. This villain is all talk. He's tough on the outside, but that's about it. Supporting character, don't believe a word he says. I can personally attest that he drools over your photo every single night. Villain on the outside, don't think I like you. Villain on the inside, sniffle, why isn't my wife comforting me yet? You have no idea, do you? Trust me, just call him honey once, and this guy will turn into a loyal puppy, licking you up and down. Watching Louis get ready to leave, I decided to give it a shot. Honey? The man froze. His deep eyes locked onto me, looking like he was about to devour me whole. What did you just call me? Louis's voice was a little hoarse. It was still cold, but the wall of ice he'd had up just a moment ago was gone. Knowing the live comments had given me good advice, I softened my tone. Can you please not go? It's thundering outside. I'm scared. I wasn't lying. Ever since my grandmother passed away, I've been terrified of thunderstorms. Louis knew that. He just stared at me for a long time, so long that I thought he was going to walk out anyway. But then, he pulled a pair of pajamas from the closet and went into the bathroom. Didn't he already shower? When did Louis get so obsessed with cleanliness? The comments, however, were freaking out. Sweetie, that's not him being a neat freak. That's him, you know. Our girl calls him honey once and the villain gets so hot he has to hit the shower before he embarrasses himself. Can you blame him? He hasn't been with a woman in years. He's been getting by with her old clothes and pictures. It's understandable he'd lose control for a second. OMG, even in this state, he's in the bathroom whispering her name. These two are so pure. You upstairs, I think you have a very different definition of pure. The comments were one surprise after another. Was this a comment section or a free-for-all? How did black text start looking so dirty? My face flushed, and I had to fight the urge to press my ear against the bathroom door. I changed into my own pajamas and got into bed. An hour later, Louis came out of the bathroom. He was only wearing pajama pants, no shirt. I have to admit, I've never seen a man with a better body than Louis. He was the definition of lean, sculpted perfection, radiating raw sex appeal. Droplets of water traced their way down his firm chest and abs, disappearing into his sexy V-line. I couldn't help but swallow hard. Had enough of a look? The man's voice was unreadable. I immediately looked away. Who's looking at you? Comments, now you're not looking, and he's not happy about it. The second she looked away, the villain's brow furrowed so hard it could crack. Don't be scared, girl. We're not just gonna look, we're gonna touch. Bet if you touch him, he'll have to take another trip to the bathroom. Of course, I didn't dare touch him. I knew exactly how strong Louis was. He was pure muscle. I was afraid if I so much as laid a finger on him, he'd snap my wrist in two. The comments were just a bunch of instigators who loved the drama. The man beside me seemed to hesitate for a moment before taking another blanket from the closet and lying down. He turned our 2-meter bed into a battlefield with a clear line down the middle. Refuses to share a blanket with his wife now, but he'll be crying over her picture every night after she's gone. Cherish the days you can still see her. She's the most beautiful character in the whole book, and she's not going to be around for much longer. That's right. From the comments, I now knew that I was going to die soon. Apparently, this world was a novel, the kind where the male lead grovels to win back the girl he wronged. Louis was the villain, and I was his first love who dies tragically early on. The hero of the story was Louis's half-brother, Harry. Louis's mother had fallen into a deep depression and committed suicide after Harry's mother had an affair with her husband. After that, Lewis went to live with his maternal grandparents in poverty. This led to a deep-seated animosity toward Harry. Although the story was just beginning, their two companies were already on a collision course. The real catalyst, however, was my death. The day after our wedding, I was supposed to go abroad for work. There, I would run into Harry's friends, who, to get back at Lewis, would hire some guys to teach me a lesson. But those guys would get other ideas, assault me, and dump my body in the ocean. After that, Lewis would completely snap, starting an all-out war with Harry that could only end in death. But how could a villain ever beat the hero? In the end, Lewis would die in the same ocean where I disappeared. Reading this, I immediately took out my phone and cancelled my flight for the next morning. I told my assistant to change tomorrow's meeting to a video call. If the other party didn't agree, we'd just cancel the deal. Making money wasn't as important as staying alive. Comments? She's not going abroad? Thank God. She's too beautiful. I was heartbroken thinking about how horribly she was going to die. This is one of the few villains in romance novels who doesn't fall for the main heroine. He had such a tragic childhood, please, author, give him a happy ending. Tragic or not, it doesn't change the fact that he hurts the hero and heroine. Why are people defending a villain? Have some morals. Yeah, you're so noble. I hope when you go through everything the villain did, you'll still be able to love the little brother who took everything from you. Honestly, if I went through what the villain did, my resentment could power a small army. I was engrossed in the comments when I heard the man beside me shift, followed by a soft, pained groan. Lewis had an old injury from when a heavy object fell on him at a construction site. It always ached on damp, rainy days. Remembering what the comments said about him staying single for decades after I died, and how he eventually died at sea with my ashes, my eyes welled up. I tentatively reached my hand into his blanket and slowly placed it on his shoulder. I felt Lewis's body tense, but he didn't stop me. Just as my hand grazed his chest, Lewis's breath hitched. He grabbed my hand, his voice raspy. "What are you doing?" I bit my lip. "Where's the muscle rub?" "I'll help you with it." The man's grip on my hand tightened, his Adam's apple bobbing. I knew what Lewis was thinking. Before we broke up, I used to give him massages all the time. But every time, things would get out of hand. The more I thought about it, the hotter I felt. I quickly pulled my hand back and turned away from him. "Fine, if you don't want it. I'm going to sleep." "Why did you pull back?" Just a little more and the man's self-control would have snapped. "Relax. Now that she's not going abroad, that string is gonna snap sooner or later. It's her destiny to end up dazed and starry-eyed." The comments were getting way too graphic. I closed my eyes and pulled the blanket over my head to ignore them. Maybe because the wedding was so exhausting, I fell asleep without even realizing it. The next day, I woke up because I couldn't breathe. When I opened my eyes, my head was buried in a firm, muscular chest. Lewis was holding me in his arms. His large hand was wrapped tightly around my waist. When did I end up in Lewis's blanket? I struggled a bit, and Lewis seemed to sense it, pulling me even tighter with a dissatisfied grunt. My head was once again smothered by his chest. I held my breath for as long as I could, but I finally couldn't take it anymore. I wriggled my way out of his embrace, finally able to gasp for air. How could this man's muscles be so hard? His whole body felt like iron. I almost suffocated. I went to the bathroom to wash up and saw a clear bite mark on my neck in the mirror. Supporting character, don't even doubt it. The villain did that. You guys don't understand what it was like watching the villain bite her last night. It's like a dog marking his territory. So possessive. The thought of him carefully pulling his wife into his arms and stealing a few kisses is making me laugh so hard. My fingers traced the bite mark Lewis had left, and I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. Wait, why is she laughing too? Does she enjoy being bitten by the villain? Okay, so the villain is a freak, and now the supporting character is a freak too. I guess I'm destined to ship you two. I ignored the comments and happily went to the kitchen to make breakfast. I hadn't had a chance to really look around yesterday, but now I could see that Louis's house was painfully sterile. The entire place was just black, white, and gray. He didn't like people touching his things, so he didn't even have a housekeeper. The fridge was practically empty. I took out a can of Spam and muttered to myself. I really don't know how he survived all these years. What are you doing? The voice made me jump, and the knife slipped, slicing my finger. Ah! Louis rushed to my side. What's wrong? I held up my finger pitifully. I wanted to make you breakfast, and now I'm bleeding. Louis stared at my wound, his fists clenching so tight his veins popped. He took a deep breath before finally looking away. If you're hurt, go bandage it. I'll make breakfast. I felt a pang of disappointment. In the past, whenever this happened, Louis would have anxiously put my finger in his mouth. Figures. Men change the second they get money. What do you want to eat? Louis took the knife from my hand. A ham sandwich. My words made Louis's eyes flicker. Back then, my favorite breakfast was the ham sandwiches he made for me. In the end, Louis didn't say anything else and just started silently slicing the ham. With no shirt on and an apron tied around his waist, he was a sight to behold. You lucky girl, you eat so well. Can I be in the show for 2 episodes? I also want to bury my face in the villain's chest and take a few bites. Get out. Maybe my stare was too intense, because Louis knew I was watching him without even turning around. I pouted. What's the big deal? Is there a single part of your body I haven't kissed? I thought it, and then my mouth just said it. The moment the words were out, Louis's ears turned bright red. Linda. Before Louis could turn around, I had already bolted out of the kitchen. Wait, are the villain and the supporting character always this sweet? The main couple is over there fighting over a secretary, and you two are being this cute. I might just stop watching their storyline. The villain just ate the piece of ham that had her blood on it. Anyone else get my kink? This dark, possessive stuff is my jam. A little while later, Louis came out with 2 sandwiches. He had reverted to his cold demeanor and didn't even look at me. He was probably afraid I'd say something even more outrageous, because he didn't say a single word to me the entire time. After Louis left for work, I was bored, so I called our driver and had him buy a ton of home decor. I put down a soft, plush rug in the living room and hung up beautiful curtains. I even changed the bedding in our room to my favorite floral print. Looking at everything I'd set up, I felt a lump in my throat. This was almost exactly the little home Louis and I used to dream about when we lived in our tiny rental apartment. In the afternoon, I met my bestie, Mia, for tea. We were halfway through when a few familiar faces showed up. Isn't that Linda? It's been so long. Before we could say anything, they all sat down, clearly planning to join us. I knew what they were up to. They just saw that my family went bankrupt and wanted to flaunt their own success and mock me a little. The original novel's heroine, Clara, was among them. She was now Harry's fiancée and sat timidly with the group. Oh, my goodness, my brain is so fried. Linda, you just got married yesterday. I completely forgot to congratulate you. How's married life treating you? I just smiled and said nothing. Everyone knew Louis didn't care for me. Seeing me like this, they assumed I was miserable and got even bolder. At the end of the day, a woman needs to find a husband who actually likes her and will dote on her. Money alone can't save you from a miserable life. Exactly. I heard Mr. Lou hasn't had a single woman around him for years. Some executive tried to set him up with a girl, and he threw her out. Everyone's wondering if he's gay. Clara, who had been sulking about her own fight with Harry, suddenly looked at me with a mix of pity, relief, and a hint of scorn when she heard I was supposedly worse off than her. As if. Who did they think they were, laughing at me? I let out a cold laugh and twisted the wedding ring on my finger. Who said my husband doesn't dote on me? You have no idea how much he doted on me yesterday. He wouldn't even let me go when he was asleep. Last night, during round 5, he carried me into the shower and told me he's been saving himself just for me all these years. He said he only loves me, and that looking at any other woman would feel like betraying me. I even bought some new lingerie to wear for him tonight. But I guess you all wouldn't understand that kind of intimacy. When I said round 5, the other women's mouths fell open, like they'd never heard of such a thing. I wasn't lying, though. Back when Louis and I were together, he was exactly like that. The more I talked, the more shocked they looked. Even Mia tugged on my sleeve, pointing behind me. I turned around and saw Louis standing there with a few business executives. Social death. Right here, right now. I had no idea how long they'd been standing there. Judging by the comments, they had been there since the beginning of our conversation. Villain, is this how you talk about me in public? Ha ha ha, this girl will say anything. She really doesn't treat us like outsiders. The villain's mind is currently flooded with memories of their time in that little rental apartment. If it weren't for all these people, he would have dragged her home to get down to business by now. She's in for it tonight. I wonder if she'll even be able to get out of bed tomorrow. I stared blankly at Louis. Before I could react, the executives next to him had already slapped their own wives and were dragging them over to apologize to Louis. Worried Louis would embarrass me, I quickly ran up and linked my arm with his, threading my fingers through his to hold his hand. Honey, what are you doing here? Did you come just to pick me up? Louis looked at me, a little confused. I quickly shot him a look, trying to pinch his waist. But his abs were ridiculously firm. There was nothing to pinch. Damn it. Why did this man have to be in such good shape? Meanwhile, Louis's ears, which I hadn't noticed before, had turned red. He grabbed my mischievous hand. His voice trembled slightly. Don't mess around. Did he misunderstand something? In the end, Louis accepted the executive's apologies and turned to leave, pulling me along by the hand. Once we were out of the cafe and I was sure they couldn't see us anymore, I tried to tactfully pull my hand back, but Louis's grip only tightened. I couldn't shake him off. I looked up and saw that the blush on his ears hadn't faded. In fact, it was starting to spread to his face. This guy. He could just die from being so secretly flustered. Outside, Louis's assistant, Alex, had already opened the car door for us. He smiled and nodded when he saw me. Looks like the comments were right. Louis really hadn't had any women around him for years, even his assistant was a man. I gave him a brilliant smile. Then I turned my head and met Louis's dark gaze. The next second, he dropped my hand and got into the car by himself. I had no idea what I did to offend him this time. Why was this man's mood as unpredictable as my period? Once in the car, I shot Louis a glare. He didn't seem to notice and started talking business with Alex. When Alex asked if they should head back to the office, mentioning a high-level meeting in an hour, Louis seemed to hesitate for a moment. Everyone's been tired lately. Let's call it a day. Get some rest. We'll postpone the meeting until tomorrow. The words were barely out of his mouth when Alex whipped his head around from his laptop, staring at Louis in shock. If I didn't know any better, would have thought Louis said everyone's fired, not get some rest. Even the driver, Mr. Wang, couldn't help but glance at Louis in the rearview mirror. What, you don't want a break? Louis's voice grew heavier. No, not at all. I'll call everyone and tell them to head home now. Alex, as if terrified Louis would change his mind, immediately pulled out his phone to make the call, his fingers trembling slightly. He shot me a grateful look. I had no idea what he was grateful for, but I gave him a happy nod anyway. It was obvious they had all worked incredibly hard to achieve so much in just a few years. I turned and saw Louis frowning at me. I gave him a sweet smile and reached for his hand, which was resting beside him. Louis froze for a second, his eyes fixed on my smiling lips. He finally pursed his lips and turned away, but he didn't pull his hand away this time. Comments, help, the villain and the supporting character must have put a spell on me. Why do I find these little interactions so sweet? The villain held back the urge to kiss her. This is a perfect example of how true love isn't about indulgence, but restraint. Compared to the toxic male lead next door who only cares about his own pleasure and ignores the heroine's feelings, our villain is a saint. Can the author please just write the hero off? Give our villain and his girl a happy ending. It's not possible. The hero's plot armor is too strong. No matter what, the villain is still going to die in the end. Reading that last line, my heart skipped a beat, and my grip on Lewis's hand tightened. I will not let anything happen to Lewis. When we got home, Lewis paused for a moment as he took in the newly decorated house. He didn't say anything and went straight upstairs. I followed him up. Seeing that he didn't question anything, I went falling into the walk-in closet to change. When I came out, I saw Lewis sitting on the bedroom sofa, flipping through a magazine. I walked over to the vanity and started combing my hair. Where are the clothes? Lewis's voice came from behind me. I was confused. What? The man paused before speaking again. Didn't you say you bought a lot of little outfits to show me? Comments, I knew it. The reason the villain left work early was because he couldn't wait to see her in that lingerie. The moment he sat on that sofa, I knew something was up. He's holding the magazine upside down, and his eyes keep darting to the closet. He can't hide it at all. It's fine if she didn't actually buy any. The villain has a whole collection of lingerie and toys in the next room. Plenty to keep you too busy. My eyes widened. Lewis was into that kind of stuff now. I turned my head, and Lewis was suddenly right behind me. Before I could say anything, he had lifted me up and sat me on the vanity. His searing body pressed against mine, his hot breath fanning my ear. I thought you'd come out wearing one. After all, you've always been the best at seducing me, haven't you? Lewis wasn't wrong. Our relationship had started with me seducing him. Back then, Lewis was the campus genius, the aloof campus god. Those two titles were enough to make most of the girls at school fall for him. But he had another label, poor. It added a touch of tragic vulnerability to his cool, handsome exterior. At the time, Lewis attended classes during the day and worked at a coffee shop at night to make money. I personally saw no fewer than 20 rich women slip him hotel key cards. Among them were many beautiful and charming heiresses. And I was one of them. The difference was, when other girls approached him, Lewis would politely decline with a smile. But with me, he was always cold and distant. As if I was handing him a scam call from a telemarketer, not a key card. Back then, it wasn't that I actually wanted to do anything with Lewis. I just naively thought that if he turned down all those other girls but accepted my key card, it would mean he wanted to be with me. Unfortunately, I tried for 3 months straight without a single success. Then, because of exams, I didn't go to the coffee shop for about a week. When I went back, I could feel Lewis's eyes on me the entire time. When I took out my key card again, bracing for his usual cold shoulder, he actually took it. The man's face flushed, and he coughed awkwardly. I only refused before because I thought things were moving too fast. I wanted to wait until after graduation. I immediately shot to my feet, excited. What do you mean, too fast? I need this now. After graduation will be too late. At my words, Lewis's face got even redder. He clutched the key card and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, saying he'd be there at 8 tonight. I grabbed his hand and thanked him profusely. Later, when Lewis arrived at the hotel room, he found me sitting at the desk with my calculus textbook. Calculus was my biggest fear on this exam. If Lewis didn't save me, I was definitely going to fail. I'll never forget the look on Lewis's face. He looked like he'd just eaten a bug. And so, in a 5-star couple's suite, Lewis tutored me in calculus for 4 hours. In the end, we missed the dorm curfew and had to stay the night. I forget who made the first move, but we didn't end up wasting the 5-star hotel room. We spent the whole night together. And almost missed our exam the next afternoon. Thinking about it now, I looked up into Lewis's burning gaze and suddenly felt like throwing all caution to the wind. I reached out, pulled his tie down, and kissed him. Comments, squealing. Ah, the villain and the supporting character are finally kissing. And she initiated it. Go, Queen. I love it. The villain's muscles are about to burst through his shirt. Just thinking about what she's about to go through, my drool is practically tears. Queen, please, don't stop. The villain is about to lose it. My hand caressed his throat, tracing the line of his bobbing Adam's apple. Lewis's pupils dilated, and a soft gasp escaped his lips. Linda, do you know what you're doing? Of course I do. I'm seducing my husband. My voice was soft, but it made the man's breathing even more erratic. The next second, Lewis grabbed the back of my neck and kissed me hard. Unlike my gentle, exploratory kiss, Lewis's was deep and fierce, as if he wanted to crush me into his very being. I don't know when, but I found myself thrown onto the bed. Just as my hand moved from his abs to his belt buckle, Lewis grabbed it. Tell me, why did you break up with me 4 years ago? Did I do something wrong? The man's hoarse voice was filled with a hurt vulnerability, a question that had clearly been weighing on him for a long time, when he finally had the courage to ask. Does the past even matter? The important thing is that we're together now, right? I admit, it was a crappy thing to say, but right now, I really didn't want Lewis to know the real reason we broke up. A self-deprecating laugh came from above me. You're right. It doesn't matter anymore. With that, Lewis stood up. Without another look at me, he went straight to the bathroom. He paused when he picked up his gray pajama pants, then swapped them for a black pair. Comments, why did he stop? Villain, you get back here. You stop now, are you even a man? Author, I'm all ready to go, and this is what you give me? From pure love to pure hate in seconds? I know the villain is of the pure love type, but I don't want to see pure love right now, you get me? I know this is probably not the time, but I have to ask, why did he switch from the gray pants to the black ones? They're basically the same, right? You upstairs, go sit at the kids' table. Don't ask questions you shouldn't ask. After coming out of the bathroom, Lewis went to his study and didn't come back all night. When I woke up the next day, he had already left for the office. I knew Lewis was avoiding me. I was a little mad. Fine, let him avoid me for the rest of his life. I wasn't going to say a single word to him for a week. But that flag hadn't even been planted for 2 hours before I saw the comments blowing up. High alert. The villain is about to sign the contract with J Corporation today. The hero is pretending to compete with the villain for this deal, but he's actually already conspired with J Corp to screw the villain over. The second the villain signs that contract, it's the beginning of his company's downfall. Can the supporting character please go save the villain? I can't bear to watch him walk step by step into failure. In the end, I couldn't resist. I packed a lunch and went to Lewis's company. When Alex found out I was there, he immediately came downstairs and escorted me up to the CEO's office. Seeing me, Lewis still looked a little awkward. What are you doing here? I held up the lunch container. Bringing you lunch. My eyes, however, were on the contract in his hands. Lewis nodded, not looking at me again. I put the lunch on his desk and slowly moved behind him. It was, indeed, the partnership agreement with J Corporation. I started massaging Lewis's shoulders. I felt his body tense for a second before slowly relaxing. Knowing the time was right, I spoke softly. I have a bad feeling about this partnership with J Corp. Lewis's movement stopped. Why? I couldn't think of a reason, so I just made one up. The CEO of J Corp has a bad face. I don't like it. He looks unlucky. His company will definitely go bankrupt in a few years. Lewis, this is because of Harry, isn't it? I froze, surprised that Lewis was so perceptive. The man's voice turned cold. Are you in love with him? Is that why you want me to give him the deal? How is that even possible? I immediately denied it, wondering what kind of crazy ideas were going through Lewis's head. The comments, however, were dying of laughter. I almost forgot, the supporting character once went on a blind date with the hero. Right? She probably forgot herself, but the villain was grinding his teeth with jealousy back then. This is hilarious. They're talking about two completely different things. She's all about business, and he's all about romance. Lewis really is one of the top 3 most lovesick villains in modern romance novels. So that was it. To gain my father's trust back then, I had gone on a few blind dates. It was all for show. I don't even remember what most of them looked like. Seeing that I wasn't lying, Lewis's expression softened slightly. You should go home. I'll reconsider the partnership. I wanted to press the issue, but Alex was already ushering me out of the office. At the door, Alex quietly tried to reassure me. He said this deal had been in the works for a long time, and Lewis wouldn't give it up easily. It wasn't that he was intentionally ignoring my opinion. But before the door had fully closed, I heard Lewis say to Alex, who had just walked back in. Cancel the deal. And from now on, don't take any partnerships with J Corp. My wife said their CEO has a bad face. Alex was petrified on the spot. The comments exploded with a screen full of ha 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 ha. Okay, he gets to be jealous of his wife, but he also has to listen to her. The villain knows how to prioritize. Alex, what did I do to deserve this? This couple is messing with me. What were all my sleepless nights and lost hair for? Count it as a lesson in being young and resilient. In the days that followed, I used the comments' hints to identify and root out all the spies Harry had planted in Lewis's company. But after my first experience, I learned to be more subtle. For example, I'd casually mention in front of Lewis how handsome a certain male colleague was, how he was totally my type. The next day, that colleague would be transferred to the African branch to manage the least important department. Or I'd praise another colleague for how focused and charming he was while coding. Soon after, he'd be blessed with a generous severance package. It got to the point where everyone would get nervous whenever they saw me. Even Alex would take a detour to avoid me, terrified I'd say something nice about him. At first, I had my doubts. With Lewis's abilities, it didn't seem possible that Harry could plant so many spies. But then I understood. It wasn't that Lewis was incompetent, it was that the hero's plot armor was just too strong, and the villain was always forced to act foolishly. Under my strict watch, Harry was slowly running out of moves. Lewis's company flourished, slowly starting to overshadow Harry's. For a while after that, Harry made no new moves. Just when I thought he had given up, the long-dormant comments reappeared. Be careful, supporting character. The hero is planning to frame the villain as an illegitimate child at the upcoming business summit. Lewis's father will also be there to confirm the hero's story. The villain won't be able to clear his name. I really don't get why so many people want to save the villain. Harry is clearly the hero. I'll always be on Team Hero. The hero you're rooting for not only assaults the heroine but also messes around with the mistress who caused her to miscarry. He makes me sick. I really hope the heroine sends him to jail soon. But this is a grovel to get her back novel. The hero regrets it so much later. He kneels in the rain for a whole night and gets a fever so bad he ends up in the hospital. Yeah, right. The heroine only lost a baby, but the hero got a fever for her. Well, I hope you end up with a toxic psycho just like him someday. If you don't want to go, I can take Alex. Seeing me holding the summit invitation for a long time, Lewis thought I was reluctant. I looked up at him and smiled. Go? Why wouldn't I go? Since Harry wanted to twist the truth. I was going to give him a big surprise. The day of the business summit finally arrived. The moment I walked into the venue on Lewis's arm, we were blocked by 3 figures. It was Lewis's father and Harry, with a haggard-looking Clara beside them. Lewis's father looked at me with contempt. So you're Lewis's wife? The daughter of a bankrupt company has no place in our Lou family. I shot back without missing a beat. Who said I wanted to enter your broken-down family? I've always been part of Louis's mother's family. If her last name wasn't also Lou, Louis probably would have changed his name a long time ago. The moment I finished, Louis chimed in with a nod. That's right. It infuriated Louis's father so much he could barely speak, almost stumbling. Thankfully, Harry was there to steady him. Louis, don't get too cocky. A person's luck can't last forever. I hope you're still smiling later. Louis and I ignored them and walked right past. Louis went to chat with other business partners, so I found a spot to relax and have some snacks. I don't know when, but Clara sat down next to me, holding a glass of champagne. I remembered the comments mentioning she had just had a miscarriage. I asked a server to bring her a glass of milk. At the end of the day, Clara hadn't done anything to hurt me. As a fellow woman, I wanted to help her in any small way I could. When Clara saw the milk, she quickly shook her head. Harry said drinking milk at an event like this is embarrassing. It would make him lose face. I took her hand and told her with unwavering conviction, Clara, there is no one in this world more important than you. My words made Clara freeze for a long time. Finally, as if she couldn't hold it in any longer, she broke down and cried. Linda, thank you. I patted her shoulder. If you need help, you can come to me. I wouldn't proactively help Clara. Some things, if you can't stand up for yourself, no amount of help from others will matter. At that moment, Harry was on stage with a microphone. He announced that he was about to reveal a secret in front of all the reporters. He claimed that someone in the room was his family's illegitimate son. That his mother was a mistress who had run off with a lot of their family's money. And that this illegitimate son's success was all built on their family's stolen wealth. The moment he finished, reporters swarmed the stage, asking who this person was and if Harry had any proof. Harry shot Louis a triumphant smile. Of course I do. Everyone, please look at the big screen. Soon, a slideshow of photos started playing on the screen behind him. But the crowd started looking at Harry strangely. Even his father's face turned ashen before he collapsed to the ground. Harry finally realized something was wrong. He turned around, only to see the screen displaying photos of his own mother as a mistress. There was even a picture of him at 5 years old, kneeling with his mother in front of Louis and Louis's mother, begging for forgiveness. In an instant, Harry staggered back, his face a mask of disbelief. This time, it was my turn to smile triumphantly. As soon as I knew Harry was preparing fake photos, I had gone to Louis's grandparents and gotten the evidence of his father's affair that they had kept. They had only saved it for a rainy day, never thinking they'd actually have to use it. Meeting my gaze, Harry knew instantly that I was behind it. He pushed through the crowd, ready to attack me. So it was you, you bitch. You ruined my plans. I'm going to kill you. But before his fist could reach me, Louis caught it. The next second, Louis twisted his wrist with a sharp, brutal snap. Crack. Harry's agonizing scream echoed through the hall. Louis sent him to the ground with a punch and then planted his foot heavily on his chest. Harry's screams grew louder. Yeah, villain, go. I've wanted to punch the hero like that for so long. Someone help him. A group beatdown would be even better right now. After dealing with him, Louis rushed over to check on me. He let out a slow breath of relief when he saw I was unhurt, then looked at me with a complicated expression. I gave him a sheepish smile, about to explain. But then, Louis suddenly collapsed onto me. I quickly caught him. Looking at his face, I saw an unnatural flush. Louis was still fighting it. The drink, there was something in it. I knew it. Harry must have had someone drug Louis's drink. And the fight just now had sped up the drug's effects. Harry was ruthless. He didn't just want to ruin Louis's reputation, he wanted to frame him as a rapist, too. I ignored the chaos around us and rushed Louis upstairs to a hotel room. I threw him on the bed and started taking off his clothes. Louis quickly grabbed my hand. Linda, no. I'll hurt you. I cupped his face and kissed him. It stopped all his protests. Louis's sharp nose brushed against my cheek, and our breaths grew hotter. But I want you. Those 3 words made Louis's breath catch, the corners of his eyes turning red. As if he couldn't hold back any longer, he grabbed the back of my head, taking control and kissing me with even more ferocity. Comments: the villain and the supporting character are finally getting it on. It was worth putting up with that psycho hero for this long. I deserve this. Why did the screen suddenly go black? I can only hear them. I knew it, the author would never let us see the good stuff. Hey, be grateful. The villain's voice is so intoxicating. It's giving me chills. In a haze, I heard the man's whisper in my ear. Linda. Do you love me? I love you. Who am I? Louis. Louis. And just like that, I was forced to say I love Louis countless times. The man flipped me back and forth like a pancake until dawn. And I finally understood what the comments meant by him being like a puppy. Later, Louis told me he hadn't wanted me to know about his family because he was afraid I would look down on him. And I explained the real reason we broke up 4 years ago. The person who had sabotaged Louis, making it impossible for him to find a job and forcing him to work construction, was my father. My father was an extreme egoist. He had even indirectly caused my mother's death. All he wanted was for me to marry into a powerful family to help his business. So I had to break up with Louis and spend 4 years systematically destroying my own family's company from the inside. I didn't dare tell Louis because I didn't want him to know I had become a manipulative person who could even harm her own father. I was afraid he would hate me, that he would be wary of me. After listening, Louis kissed my shoulder. You're so silly. I traced the lines of his abs. Not as silly as you. The man's eyes grew hot again, his lips brushing against my neck. Honey, my shoulder is hurting again. Can you help me rub it? Of course, it didn't end with just a massage. Comments: okay, so our villain has officially joined the Eating His Words club. Before, villain grabs her hand, what are you doing? Now, honey, my shoulder hurts, help me rub it. LMAO, you upstairs, you know how to summarize. While Louis and I were getting all lovey-dovey, the outside world had descended into chaos. The news that Harry Liu, the general manager of Liu Corporation, was an illegitimate son sent the company's stock plummeting. The shock was too much for Louis's father, who had a stroke and was hospitalized. While Harry was drowning in problems, Clara hired a lawyer and sued both him and his mistress. The Liu Corporation went completely bankrupt, and Harry was arrested. As for me, once my relationship with Louis stabilized, I started a jewelry brand with a friend. When we were hiring, the first person to interview was, surprisingly, Clara. Her education and skills were a perfect fit, so we hired her on the spot. Of course, I had my own selfish reasons. Clara was the heroine of this world. In the original story, after being tormented by Harry, her luck was off the charts. With her on my team, my company was bound to make a fortune. Just thinking about the life of leisure ahead of me made me smile in my sleep.